So I'm easy to find. I'm the only Michael Padurano on the whole planet. There is not another one. You Google me, you're only going to find me. And if you're lucky, you might find my mugshot from 2004 for my DUI. And if you do, please send me it because I haven't been able to find it. So anybody who's a detective out there, please send it over. It's hysterical to look at because of how far I've come since then. I'm on Instagram, M Padurano. I'm on LinkedIn is my primary. It's been for 18 years. So LinkedIn is where I do business, where I build businesses, where I impact the business community. And I do have my YouTube channel, which is under again Mike Padurano. So I mean, you'll search my name, you'll find it all. It's not hard to find for me.
Perfect. So take us through the genesis of why you started all of this and where do you want it to go? So what inspired you to become this version of Michael?
That's a really deep, complicated question because I don't think it's one thing. I think it's multifaceted. Like we're multifaceted beings, spiritual beings living a human experience, right? So if we break all down all the pieces and we go into full embodiment and embrace it all, which is what I try to live in, is unconditional self-love. And spending the first, I'm 44 today and I'll be 45 in May. I spent the first 40 years of my life absolutely despising myself. Couldn't stand looking at myself. Showered in the dark, hated myself, couldn't stand myself. I was adopted at birth, abused in childhood from 2 to 14, started drinking at 9, doing hardcore drugs at 12, overdosed a few times, drowned twice, beat to death once, got a whole bunch of near death experiences, which created my spiritual belief structure beyond this physical experience. And then I married the wrong person because I was in a bad place. She was in a bad place. We stayed miserable together for a while. We had 3 kids, and then I couldn't take it anymore and I had to leave. So we were in Arkansas at the time, middle of nowhere, USA. And I went back to Florida to restart working on myself and start working and healing myself. And in that period of time, we worked out a verbal divorce before I left. All got swept under the rug. She took my kids, met a guy online, and disappeared with my kids. 3 weeks later, I had no contact with my children almost for 20 total months. Very minimal contact, if any, for 20 months. I had no idea where they were until I hacked their credit card. Um, that was the real changing point. I've been sober 17 and a half years. So back in 2006, I got sober, but I never did any of the emotional work. So I was sober, but I wasn't that sober and free that people like to say. I had no freedom. I was miserable, more miserable sober. I hid behind porn, sex, womenizing, gambling, opening businesses. I hid behind everything, anything to avoid feeling. And then, so when I left my wife, ex-wife, and kids in 2018, she disappeared, whatever, all that stuff, right? They're sweep that under the rug for right now. In 20 December of 2019, when I was back in Florida, my father was still alive at the time. He took me out to lunch, and for the first time in my life, any one of my family members acknowledged the abuse I went through in my childhood. Because up until then, it was swept under the rug. It wasn't real. It never really happened. We sat down and had this big cry fest where he asked me what happened in childhood because it was my mother that abused me, not my father. He did the best he could. Both of my parents did the best they could. They had generational trauma and nobody knew how to heal those things back, in the 80s, 90s. So I don't blame anyone. Everyone does the best they can. I truly believe that. And when we had that conversation, it gave me a sense of peace that I never experienced in my life. Because for the first time, I didn't feel like I was the liar, manipulator, storyteller that I was told I was my whole childhood. And then at that point, what happened from there became in I'm trying to think. So February of 2020, right before COVID, I got physical proof of evidence of the abuse against my children from my ex sister in law and ex mother in law. At that point, what I did was I got in the car and I drove to Arkansas with $3.46 to my name. No idea how I was going to do anything. I thought that it was all going to be okay. I just knew that I had to go do this. I had to go save my children. It's the only thing I knew. I packed for 8 days. I left with full tank of gas and $3.46. Borrowed from Peter, Paul, everyone I could borrow from to get to them to try and be there. My father ended up flying up and helping me to secure the lawyer. All these different things. We met the lawyer. We secured the lawyer. And then that was February 25th. And it took him 11 days to process the paperwork. So I was within an hour of my kids and couldn't go anywhere near them because the element of surprise was what was protecting the circumstance of me fighting for my children. So I was within an hour of my kids, knowing the abuse they were going through daily because it was daily abuse, and I couldn't do anything. I felt more helpless. More, my lawyer was telling me, "Oh, it's going to get filed. It's going to get filed." It still wasn't filed. It was 11 days of that torture, with living on a $20 a day stipend because my father would send me $20 a day. I would buy a pack of cigarettes. I would eat the worst food in the world. It was the most disgusting thing ever. And then on March 6th, I got the emergency order for my kids. Keep in mind, I packed for 8 days, so I'm already there 11. So I get my kids. We go to a motel because that's all that there is in these little towns. We went to a motel. We stayed in that motel for another month, and then at that point, they gave us our next court date, which was 6 or 9 months away. At that point, because then COVID started. So it was right before COVID started that I got my kids, and then the whole world shut down. And now you're talking about a small town of between 5 and 10,000 people, very inadequate uh, judicial system, and all these other things. So everything went to a grinding halt. I found an Airbnb, and I said, you know what? Rather than paying every day for the hotel, I did a GoFundMe. I got a little bit of funds. I was able to secure an Airbnb for a couple months, and I just went month by month at the Airbnb from that point forward. The guy was religious, thank God. He was really nice. He was very generous. He worked out a deal with me, so it worked out to less than half of what the hotel was costing. The motel was costing. Um, I was there. I ended up being there for 19 months, fighting for my children. Now, during this period of time, at first, I was devastated. I'm like, I packed for 8 days. I have evidence of the abuse. Why is the system not supporting me? Why is the system against me? Because I heard things like "you're the outsider." Because that movie, My Cousin Vinny, is very factual about that type of mentality and area, and it was similar area to that. So you have this Italian guy coming from South Florida, an outsider fighting for his kids to take him away from their mother. So that was the outside perception of what I was doing because there was 11 child services cases open. They never even took my kids out of the house. The one time they did take my kids out of the house, they told them that they were bringing them back. My kids were smart enough not to say a word. So child services never did anything. There were well visits to see if my kids were okay, but because of the nepotism in that area, they never even checked on my kids. Plus, in that area, it's the God is smiting, God is evil, God is this. You do anything wrong, so abuse and physical. I want to say the right word. Physical discipline is acceptable, and this was an extreme case because my son had black and blues up and down his whole back. My youngest at the time, which was about 30 months old, was so neglected that she had holes in her scalp from lice so bad that it took me shaving her head 3 times to get rid of them. Her hair was so bad it was dreadlocks. She had a yeast diaper rash from belly button to the top of her butt. Um, she had scabies head to toe. That's how neglected she was. And so during this time, I'm going through this enormous emotional breakdown. You can call it a dark night of the soul. You can call it whatever you want to label it. I don't care. It was this enormous breakdown to break through. So I had no choice but to start working with any coach I could find, work with anybody I could find to start healing what I avoided my whole life to do. So I ended up losing 50 pounds during that time. I ended up working with between 40 and 50 coaches, upwards of 7 shamans, two priests, one rabbi. During that period of time, I was ordained by 2 shamans. I was doing all these different works. I went through 40 to 50 books because I found out that I was audiological, which I had no idea why I couldn't learn the way that they wanted me to learn in school. But I was an audio. I found audio books and started consuming information, and I started really working on modalities and ways to heal myself and heal through my trauma. I also worked with a couple of psychotherapists to go through really the deep rooted trauma. And from that point forward, what's put me on the path I am today is because I recognized that the world was in a reactive state. It's, these ACEs exams and other exams say up over 70% of adults have unhealed trauma. So when you look at the world from that perspective, It's no wonder we're not at more wars because it's such a reactive state. I don't even think people understand what these wars are about. They just know that it's cultural and generational trauma that's passed down. You're attacking me, I'm attacking you. You're attacking me, I'm attacking you. If we live that way as individuals in this world, we'd be dead in a week. We wouldn't even make it a week. We'd be probably dead the same day. So, like, the reality is, if us as individuals have to pause and learn to heal our trauma and become responsive, take that breath, process the information coming in, understand that somebody is also not healed, and this is all just a reactive scenario, then overall as a macro for the global, I use my hands, I talk with my hands, is a on a macro scale of the global collective, we've got to be extremely reactive. So I've made it my I had a major stroke a year and a half ago, 3 places in my brain. 86% chance I'd be a vegetable for the rest of my life. I healed myself. My doctor calls me a walking miracle, doesn't understand it. Every doctor, every specialist they sent me to, I came back crystal clear, perfect. They don't understand what happened. But I can tell you I got a download, and what my download was is the program that I created now, which is to help the world move from a reactive state to a responsive state, to go from unaware to aware, to go from awareness to compassionate self-awareness, to go from hating yourself to unconditionally loving yourself and transition through the phases.
Yeah, Michael, and if I may add to that, one thing I want to highlight, a few things I want to highlight in what you said is that you had to figure it out for yourself and you had to understand what was going on. There's many of us, myself included, for a number of times, where we're more reactive, we're not preventative, we're not
Mm-hmm.
proactive, right? And this can go from, let's say, in our relationships, romantic relationships, and go through schools, is go through our relationship with our doctors. We can be walking through life just reacting to the world. And another point that you made, which was fantastic, was that we see all these things happening around us that break us down, but we're just reacting to it. From our parents handing down trauma, from our grandparents, from our brother or sister, family members, the women we date, the men that they date, we are just reacting. So for you, when you were fighting for your children in this way, trying to make sure that you were protected them like a good parent would, like the strong father that you are, was there ever a moment in time where you thought, man, Michael, I don't know if this is going to work, and doubt began to creep in?
24/7, every single day. There was not a day that didn't go by that I didn't think that. Even at the end, I was still anxious and nervous because my patterns and behaviors for my whole 40 whatever years it was, 42 at that point, I guess. I'm trying to do the math real quick, but I don't know if that's working. Um, Whatever that period of time for my life, my patterns and behaviors were that it wasn't going to work out because I self sabotaged every step of the way. So, how could it work out? I couldn't even fathom it working out. Like, I didn't know how it could. I didn't understand logically how it couldn't, but I also didn't understand with my pattern and behaviors, with what I know my life to be, that it could work out. So every day there was that question. During that 19 months, I went through 65 subject notebooks of journaling. I was crying every single day. I always make the joke that I had to order pallets of tissues to survive. And that's why COVID ran out of tissues because I had them all. I used toilet paper. I used any paper I could find. Like my kids used to make fun of me watching me do all this because I would be bawling my brains out trying to create a safe space for them. But what I look back at it now is it was a miracle of them watching me heal through this. Because today, my 6 year old, Dad, you're off. Go write a self forgiveness letter. Dad, you're off. Go journal. But this is my 6 year old. Dad, you're off. Go meditate. Right. So I see the gift in it now, but I didn't realize the gift of it in the time. In the time, it was how am I going to make it till tomorrow? How am I going to make it for the next hour? Because I didn't know how. What I figured out through this whole process and post stroke, when I released attachment to most things, almost all things actually, is that we have no control over anything. So let's stop pretending. That's first of all. We have no control over anything but our actions and our reactions. So if we can only control those two things, then release it all because it's not ours to control. I can't control what they put on the news. I can't control what they're doing halfway around the world. I can only control how I react to it. I haven't watched the news in almost 2 years. I have no reason to. I can feel the energy globally and understand where the world's at. What the hell do I need to watch the news and the scare tactics that come in from one angle or another? It's so divisive. All they want to do is divide and conquer. Because if the 99.9% raise up and unify, the 1/10 of a percent can't control it anymore. So the only role that they have with mass media and everything else is to divide. It's social media's fault. It's this fault. It's that person's fault. It's black. It's white. It's gay. It's trans. It's straight. Anything that they can polarize, they're going to polarize. And what they did was they used COVID, polarizing different things, to then turn around and put laws through to start taking away civil liberties in this country. And people were so blind and so ignorant, they didn't even notice. And then because it's red or blue, whatever side they chose to stand on, they defend the actions, not understanding what the truth is. The truth, okay, so there's 8.1 billion perspectives on this planet. Every one of them is true. Every single one. It's true to them. We can't argue somebody else's truth. What we can do is sit down and take the time to understand. We can sit down and have safe spaces to have conversations on opposing views to understand ourselves. Why are we thinking the way that we're thinking? And why do they think the way they think? Because they're allowed to. It's their experience also. We are interdependent, not codependent. In the US, I don't know as much about Canada, but what I can tell you in the US is middle class white, they raise to be codependent in every way, shape, or form. What I can tell you is middle to lower class African American or black or Negro or whatever you want to call it, right? That culture and Spanish and Latino also, that culture they raise to be hyper independent. So they create the opposite polar extremes. Nobody's in the middle of interdependence, which is what the world should be. You have Hallmark making billions off people getting cards because they've driven us to a point that you have to be sorry for everything to everyone else. But at what point are we apologizing to ourselves? What point are we releasing ourselves from all the crap we carry on ourselves? That is what really matters in this world. So at the core of what I do, it's helping people to self-connect to their higher power, whatever their belief structure is. It's self-forgiveness, and then it's journaling to understand the dynamics that we live around in an objective way. So you can stand on the outside of the trauma and drama triangle and become a role that I call the integrator, which is observing from a healed space rather than participating in the roles.
And I
That was a
will,
lot.
no, you're saying it in a way that I 100% agree with. There's a time in my life where I wanted to be the very best at X, for example, right? And you're very right because growing up, it was always independent, independent, independent. And that maybe is a culture because a lot of people of color, let's say black people, because that's what I am, we're raised that way where we feel like as soon as I'm 18, I'm going to run away from my parents and I'm going to be the richest person in the world, very independent. Until I realized once I got into my 20s and I started to go to school and my social circle expanded outside of my neighborhood, and I began to see people that look like you, people that look different than the both of us, I began to understand what you just said about white males, where there's the dependence on within the household, especially the middle class. And then I started to take what I viewed was the very best of all my experiences with different cultures. And I found something that was in common with them all, of the ones who were successful. They knew the role of everyone around them and how that it would benefit them, but more importantly, how they want to structure their life to benefit themselves. Right? Is that what you're alluding to when you said that there's interdependence? We need to understand how we all can play a role in each other's lives, not forgetting the most important role, which is ourselves.
So, okay, so let me take a step back on that. So from 30,000 feet or 30,000 meters, right, whatever you want to talk about, meters or feet. So if we're looking at it from an airplane view, right, we're looking down on it, we have to love ourselves first. We have to work on ourselves first. We have to live and embody who we are, because we are how we act. We're not we are not what we say we are. We are our actions. Well, that was a lot of weird words put together. So But our actions define who we are as a human being. If we don't love ourselves, then we deserve to be treated like shit because that is how we're showing others to treat us. We can't complain if we treat ourselves like shit if others treat us like shit. People want to talk about boundaries. I don't believe in boundaries. I believe in limitlessness. What I believe in is I create a standard of how I deserve to be treated based on how I treat myself, and I give temporary boundaries for permanent people so they understand how I treat myself, get into my circle, understand. And if you don't meet that, or if you're trying to impose your stuff on me, I just remove you from my circle. I don't care. You're gone. I don't need boundaries. Boundaries are walls. You know, their biggest thing in therapy buzzword over the last 3 years is boundaries. So then everyone's creating walls around them and they live in all these walls and they start squeezing into another box. I don't believe in the box. I believe we are limitless and can be anything and everything. We have 100% ability to live into anything we desire, but the we are 100% how we act. Our actions define who we are. So it's time to take a step back and stop talking but act instead. We deserve what we allow. That is the raw truth that's painful to hear. We deserve what we allow. When I absorbed that and I learned that, that's when I started changing how I treated myself. And it was a transition. It wasn't perfect, right? I went from 40 years of despising myself to, for the first time in August of 2020, saying I love me. August of 2021, I said I love myself. I'm in love with myself, ignored all my flaws, went a little bit into ego and went high on my own supply and, ignored the flaws, right? Live into your strengths and ignore your flaws. It's such bullshit because all you do is go into that toxic positivity to, after my stroke, moving into a place of unconditional self love. I embrace my flaws. I embrace it all, the warts, the hairs, the everything, the weight, the smoking, whatever it is. I embrace it all. I am nowhere near perfect. I created something called growing forward because that to me is the perfect label of my state of being. Every day I grow and evolve through the lessons I absorb. And it's just a permanent state of growing forward. I love it because you don't have to explain anything. I'm in a state of growing forward. That's it. Because every day is a lesson. There is no perfection. I'm not 1% better today because now I'm going to go scientific on you. Science says that we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. Up to 95% of them are pre-programmed, subconscious based on our historical patterns and beliefs, patterns and behaviors. And then up to 85% of them slant to the negative. So I know my mind. And if I tell myself I'm 1% better today, my mind, not anyone else, doesn't have to work for anyone else. This is about me. We're talking about me now. The rest of the world can emulate or not emulate. It's up to what fits for them. But if I tell myself I'm 1% better today, my mind automatically says you're 1% worse yesterday. And I can't unconditionally love myself if I'm beating up who I was yesterday. I have to love every facet of who I am to embrace and embody unconditional self-love. And that is what I want to radiate to the world is unconditional love and unconditional self-love. But I had to learn to love myself first. And it went through transitions, phases. And that's how I created what I created based around my personal experience. It doesn't mean it's going to work perfectly for everyone because there's infinite ways to get there. But when you don't know any tools, having some tools is better than no tools. So I put my book out in December. It has my workbooks in it. It's only for people that want to do the work because there's no benefit any other way. It's half of the book is blank templates to actually do the work in it. It's the reason I priced it higher than normal books. It's priced at like 45 American dollars because you don't need a coach. You don't need anyone. You need yourself. And this gives you the step by step approach of how to get somewhere for yourself. It takes you through the phases of all of it, and it's all there for you. It's a 6x9 book. You can write in it. All the templates are there. And then there's additional blank templates to print out too. Does
I
that
gave
answer your
someone,
question?
it does. Yeah, it does. Because I gave someone the example when you mentioned boundaries. I told someone, if you create enough boundaries, you're just going to imprison yourself and no one's going to be able to get in.
Right.
It's one thing to say to someone, Terrain, I don't appreciate the way you treated me. You may view that as a boundary, but you're telling me how you want to be treated. And I gave that same person the example. Look at everything that in look at everything that you would say is bad in your life, right? From the very first time up until the most recent one. I was like, I'm gonna blow your mind right now. And I told them most of your issues are because of you. And the person took a step back and they're like, no, it's this person, it's Michael, it's you, it's I was like, no, no, no. How many problems did you have where you didn't communicate how you want to be treated? How many of them where you knew the person is not a good person, but you allow them access to you in any various forms? Right. And there's many people who don't want to accept that because they view it as, well, you're putting it on me and not that person. I'm like, no, that person who treated you poorly, they're they're that person too. But they were put in a position to treat you poorly because you allowed them to be in that position. Would you agree?
100%. Yeah. Because when you respect yourself and you unconditionally love yourself, no one gets close enough to do that. They can't treat you a way that you're not going to allow. If somebody starts going against how I treat myself, I immediately call them out on it because I love and respect myself enough to do that. It's not that I'm better or worse than any other living being on this planet. I'm just more self aware of my own journey, right? I'm not ahead or behind anyone else. I'm the only one on my journey. This isn't a competition with anyone else. There is no competition. It's just a journey. And I'm not in a rush to get to the end because the end is death. I'm not looking to ascend. I'm not looking to transcend. I'm not looking to do any of these labels that everyone throws around because that's all manipulation. I'm looking to just grow forward every day until my last day. Waking up every day is the greatest gift I could ever imagine because I have to live into my purpose to impact souls. And if it's only impacting my souls, I know that radiates my soul, that radiates outward to the rest of the world.
What about the people, and you've probably heard this because I know of his, what about the people who are saying that I'm having difficulty doing that because I don't want to feel bad for telling someone to stop making me feel bad?
That you don't love yourself enough. It's really simple. It's a direct correlation. If you love yourself enough and you unconditionally love yourself when you move into that space, no one can treat you bad because you won't allow it. There's no space in your life for it. They won't even want anything to do with you because they can't stand in your light because you move your vibrational frequency up and they just move out of your way. They don't want to be around you. Yes, you lose a lot of people in your life, but that's also part of life. I'd rather have no one than all the wrong people. I spent my whole life trying to fight to belong with the wrong people. And I'm not better or worse than them. I'm just in a different space. And I'm at my own space. And I got to tell you, I've never felt more belonging in my life than I do today because I belong with myself. I belong with my higher power. I feel safe, secure, and whole. I'm not trying to fill a single void in any shape or form.
I had to have that conversation with someone. It was a friend who we've known each other since we were kids. And I had to explain to him saying that at this point in my life, I'm going in this direction, and it seems that you won't be able to make that journey with me. And I give him examples of what he was doing that I found offensive. And I told him that part of the problem that I was having with you, I'm like, part of it's me. And I explained why. I was like, I was condoning this behavior for a period of time, and I decided that I don't want to condone it anymore. Then I gave him examples. And he was resistant. He's like, no, it's not this way. And I find that to be so true, where someone is mistreating you and they will try to hide it by saying that it was just a joke. It's not that serious, even though you're telling them, no, I didn't find it funny and it is that serious. What would you want to tell people who are having difficulty trying to find the balance between, I don't want to remove these people from my life because I may be alone and I don't want to fight the feeling of loneliness?
If you're not willing to fight for yourself, then you already gave up, so it doesn't matter. This isn't a battle against anyone else. This is a battle against yourself. The feeling of loneliness disappears. I promise you it does. No one was more lonely than I was in crowds of hundreds of people. I spent tons of money. I did crazy things to always try to be the center of the attention to fill my gaps and my voids, but it never worked because it wasn't real. It wasn't sustainable. When you're looking for external everything, you have nothing internal. So until I was willing to do the work for myself, nothing changed. I was in the wrong jobs. I was around the wrong people. I had the wrong opportunities. I wasn't loving myself. I found that others weren't loving me either because I wasn't loving myself. Nobody can treat you the way that you want to be treated if you're not treating yourself that way. So I don't even go into the details that you go into. I say it very simply. We do not align in life anymore. My path is going one direction, your path is going another. There is nothing anyone can say to that because it's objective. It's very factual and straight. You're going this way, I'm going this way. It doesn't align. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with me. It just doesn't align for us. And that's it. And people have been very respectful of that sentence because they can't argue something like that because you're taking away the emotional capacity of it, which is the feelings, right? Emotions last 60 to 90 seconds. Feelings are the stories we tell around it. So it's the feelings and the stories that we've created. And whether we're hyper independent, we finally let people in, or whether we're extremely codependent and we don't want to lose what we let in because we don't think there's anyone else in the world that will love us because we don't love ourselves, right? So society has jaded all of us in one shape, form, or another. Generationally, societally, culturally, traumas that have been handed down generation over generation. It's I always look at it very simply. In America, in the 90s, it was go to high school, go to college, find a high school, or find a sweetheart, go get married, buy a house, have kids, get cars, and next thing you know, you're $1 million in debt. So you're working the next 30 to 40 years of your life to just pay down debt. You're in the system. And if you didn't do those things, you didn't fit in. You made feel like an outsider. You were felt like you didn't belong. And that was me, right? I got thrown out of 2 high schools. I didn't even graduate. I got my Series 7 brokerage stock license before I had my GED. I had to get my GED because I had my license. So I couldn't have one without the other. So I had to run and go get my GED real quick. But like, this is facts of life. Like, I've always been an outsider and I love being an outsider today because I love myself. So it doesn't matter to me. That's probably why I'm not scared to go and create this large scale corporate program that's going to evolve corporations for the next 100 years. That's why I build things out with a 250-year business plan because I see beyond my personal experience. I don't have the attachment to my name, my ego, my anything. It's how can I impact the next 250 years of humanity? And that's all I care about. The rest of it doesn't matter to me. I want to be the richest person that's never been known because I'm going to give every penny away as it comes in because I have other stuff to do with it to impact the world. I don't care about the accolades, being on lists, having boats, having cars, having houses. I don't care about any of that crap. You can't take it with you anyway. What's the damn difference? It's
I
just
think
how I
that's
feel.
Yeah, I think that's maybe the disconnect for a lot of people because a lot of people find it hard to be the outsider, and a lot of people spend many of their lives trying to fit in, especially into a group of people that they really don't like and they really can't tolerate. So for you, Michael, you've gone through a number of things where it's seasoned you in a way that I no longer need to be part of this collective because I have so much more going on. But for the other side, it's I don't have a lot going on. Let me attach myself to people that I think I do. Is that maybe the disconnect?
It's part of it. Give me 3 months by my side and I'll change your whole life. You will accidentally fall in love with yourself. You will accidentally unconditionally love yourself. You will lose all the fat and crap from your life will disappear because it won't be attracted to you anymore. You won't have an interest in it. It won't matter to you anymore. All those things just fade away when you start loving and believing in yourself. You don't have to fight. People just leave. And if they were really close to you and they really cared, would they leave? No. So what do you mean? What are you losing?
That's a
And I
very
think
good
that's
point. Go
I
ahead, go
feel
ahead.
like that's the part that gets people stuck. They know that's the case, but they don't want to believe it. That's the problem. Our mind is our worst enemy. I look at our mind. So here's my personal perspective on our mind. It is the veil between us and our higher power. Whatever you worship, whatever you call, whatever your religious beliefs are, it is the veil between us and our higher power. So what I learned through the shamanism is alchemizing. It's a matter of balancing everything with the yin and the yang and Taoism and all these different things combined, right? So when I internally look, it's always about a yin and a yang because that's true balance. So what I look to do is alchemize my direct connection to my higher power, which I honor every day in my own ways. My energy work, everything I do, meditation, mantras, all these different things, journaling, self forgiveness letters, everything I do, all the shamanic practices that I was taught, plus the ones I created on top of it, for my intuitive knowings. Because here's the other thing, you start knowing things that you don't have no idea how you know. When you start connecting to yourself and you start directly connecting to your higher power, no matter what your faith and belief structure is, you have a deeper connection to yourself and everything around you. And as you move into that space, then you start forgiving yourself and you start releasing all the crap that we've held against ourselves. One of the craziest things that I had to learn was I was blaming myself for my mother abusing me. Didn't even make sense. How does a 3-year-old blame themselves? And then I look back and I went on with one of the psychotherapists I worked with. He was also a shaman as well. And he took me through different journeys and he showed me on a psychotherapy slash shamanic way, how I would antagonize it to get the attention. And that's where I was holding on to that pain. So I had to learn to forgive myself for those things, to be free, to unconditionally love myself, to accept all facets of myself. They call it inner child work. They call it all different labels. Again, right, with the labels. Let's make it fancy and sell it. That's what matters, because that's how you fit into the world today. But I mean, I give stuff away for free all day long because information is free. What you do with it is up to you.
Yeah,
And
there's a point
I think
that
it's
when right at the beginning of you saying that was we all know who is right for us and who isn't right for us. It's we hold on to it. Some people would rather suffer in silence than have a confrontation that's going to liberate them from their abuser. You made a good point where you said that I blame myself for the abuse, or some people would say that this person's mistreating me. Yeah, it's okay. I have tough skin, but it's not supposed to be that way. You, and this is for everyone listening, what you put out there is exactly how you're going to get back. If you're going to if you're going to abuse yourself and not love yourself, then you cannot ask anyone outside of you to not abuse you and to love you, because that wouldn't make sense. Because if it's not good enough for you, it's definitely not going to be good enough for other people. So, Michael, as we close, what advice do you want to give to my audience in regards to what you're developing and how we can help them become a better person and love themselves a little bit more?
give yourself the pause. Even if you don't believe in yourself, even if you don't love yourself, even if you don't understand yourself, give yourself a pause before any reaction. Because what's going to happen is little by little, you will build that muscle and you won't be reactive. You might still want to react, but you won't be reactive. And you'll take the opportunity to step back and really step into a place where you can impact others and work with others and work with yourself. And that's really the best advice I can give anyone. Honor yourself enough to give yourself a pause. Take 5 seconds, count to five. If you still feel the same way after five, then go ahead and go nuts. Enjoy, have fun. But I promise everything changes when you give yourself that time.